Hey, hey, Disney fans, planners, and reluctant visitors. I'm Becky, and this is Touring Plans Teaches. Today, we've got Genie 301 for you. What's stacking, precious? In our last two episodes, which if you haven't seen them, you can find them back in our playlist, one of the topics that we got the most comments about was stacking. When are you going to tell us about stacking? And we see this in Instagram too. What's this stacking thing everyone talks about, and do I need to know about it? So stacking is a strategy to get a lot of value out of Genie Plus in your afternoon while maybe having a slower paced morning. So in this episode, we're going to talk about all the rules you need to know, what stacking is as a strategy, and an example of how you could use it on your park day. So the first thing you're going to need to know if you're going to start stacking your Genie Plus reservations is the 120-minute rule. Now, this is actually an important rule whether you're stacking or not, because it's what determines when you're eligible to make your next Genie Plus reservation, depending on when you made the first one. So let's say you make a reservation. That starts your timer. You aren't eligible to make your next reservation until either 1, you've checked into that reservation you just made most recently, or 2, 120 minutes have passed since you made your last reservation. So let's talk through an example of this. Let's say I'm touring Hollywood Studios. Around 11 a.m., I make a reservation for Millennium Falcon's Smuggler's Run. That reservation doesn't have me returning until about 4 p.m. So I've made my reservation at 11 a.m. That starts my 120-minute timer. So once 1 p.m. rolls around, 2 hours later, I'm eligible to go back in and make my next reservation. Now let's talk about the opposite of that. Let's say I'm at Magic Kingdom, and at 11 a.m. I book Mad Tea Party for 11:30. So at that point, I'm going to be checking into my next ride before my 120 minutes even passes. So as soon as I check into Mad Tea Party, I can make another one. But if you're stacking, the whole point is to wait those 120 minutes every time, and you're making reservations late in the afternoon or evening so that you can have an afternoon full of just using up all your Genie Plus reservations and ideally not waiting in any standby lines at all. So you're always going to be having that timer for 120 minutes after you make every reservation before you can make another one. Some people even like setting a timer on their watch or on their phone so that they know when they can log back in and make their next reservation. There are two ways that this new Genie Plus system is different than the old FastPass Plus system that enable you to use this stacking strategy. So what are those rules? One is that you aren't ever limited in the number of reservations you can hold at one time. The 120-minute rule dictates how often you can make your reservations, but you could hold 4 or 5 or 6 of them at one time if you're making them early in the day and booking them for later in the day. So that's what we're calling stacking, is how you're able to make those. The other thing that makes this possible is that back in the FastPass Plus days, your reservations weren't allowed to overlap. So if you had Peter Pan's flight from 10 to 11, you couldn't have any other reservation that overlapped with that 10 to 11 window. And so that automatically made you have to spread your reservations out, and that made it harder to use lots of them at one time. Genie Plus got rid of that rule. Suddenly, all guardrails are off, and you can overbook yourself as much as you want. So how do you use that to actually stack? You would start by booking reservations really early in the morning, 7 a.m. when you become eligible, and you'd purposefully pick attractions that have return times later in the day. So at 7 a.m., I'd choose something like Slinky Dog Dash, Jungle Cruise, Peter Pan's Flight, that tend to book up pretty quickly, and so even though I'm booking earlier in the day, my return time is in the afternoon. Then, after the park opens, my 120-minute timer starts. I could be in the park doing attractions that don't have long standby waits or watching shows, or I could be doing something fun like having brunch, not in the park at all. And I start my 120-minute timer to remind myself to book my next reservation 2 hours after the park opens. So let's say I'm booking a busy afternoon and evening for Magic Kingdom. So I'm trying to stack at Magic Kingdom. Magic Kingdom opened at 9. I booked Peter Pan's Flight first thing in the morning. So my 120-minute timer starts at 9 a.m. At 11 a.m., I can make another reservation. So again, I'm looking for something on purpose that doesn't have a return time until later in the afternoon or the evening. I book that, I start my timer again. My timer should go off around 1 p.m. I scroll through Genie again, I find something that's later in the afternoon or evening, which should now be easier because lots of things should be booking into the afternoon and evening at this point, and then I start my timer again. And so I'd continue doing this until my first reservation becomes eligible for me to check in, and then I'd start using all of my reservations. Some of them could be overlapping, but ideally I'd have an afternoon or an evening where I'm able to use 4 or 5 or 6 Genie Plus reservations, all within a few hours, so I'm quickly getting through lines, experiencing attractions, and not having to wait in any lengthy standby queues at all. Now, in the comments of one of our previous episodes, someone asked for a specific example of how to stack. I think that'll be beneficial for everyone, but what they were asking for was a Magic Kingdom day on March 13th, so just a couple days from when this video will be posting. If you look up March 13th at the Magic Kingdom on our crowd calendar, you can see that we're predicting a crowd level of 7 for that day. When we bucket out our Genie Plus reservation availability, 7 falls into a medium crowd level day. But we've been seeing crowds be a little heavier than expected over the past month or so I'm going to go ahead and call this a potentially high crowd level day, and we're going to look at that reservation availability chart and see how we could plan our day to stack reservations and have a really awesome evening at the Magic Kingdom on March 13th. Even on high crowd level days at the Magic Kingdom, right at 7 a.m., very few attractions are going to be booked out late into the afternoon or evening. So if I really, really want to stack in a tight amount of time, I actually need to hesitate a little bit before I make my first reservation. And this really doesn't hurt me at all as long as my first reservation is before the park opens, because my 120-minute timer doesn't start until the park opens anyway. So in this example, let's say that I choose to sleep in a little bit and not make my first reservation right at 7 a.m. Things that this would keep me from doing, Slinky Dog Dash would be sold out by the time I woke up, Rise of the Resistance would be sold out by the time I woke up, but since I'm at Magic Kingdom, I'm still going to have plenty of choices. So let's say I wake up at 8 a.m. and before I roll out of bed, I pull up Genie on my phone and make my first reservation for the day. I pick Jungle Cruise because it tends to book out the furthest in advance. So when I make my reservation at 8 a.m., we can see on this chart, I'm probably looking at about a 4:30 p.m. return time. Now this changes on a daily basis, so you can't plan on this being your exact timing for that day. But for example purposes, it works. So my first return time is now at 4:30 p.m. I've got a long time to go between now and then. I could have a relaxing morning in my resort. I could head to Magic Kingdom and do some attractions that really don't have any Genie Plus advantage. Things like the shows, Mickey's PhilharMagic, Mad Tea Party, Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor. I could do a lot of those types of things. Maybe even spend the morning at Tom Sawyer Island, because who doesn't want to do that, right? So I'm at the park or I'm at my resort, and the park opens, and that's when my 120-minute timer starts. So let's say the park opens at 9 o'clock. I made my first reservation at 8 o'clock, but my 120-minute timer starts at 9 o'clock, so I'm next eligible to make a reservation at 11 a.m. So at 11 a.m., I'm going to scroll through the tip board on Genie Plus again to see what return times are there. And I'm going to aim for anything that's 4:30 or later that I want to ride and that I know is going to save me some time. So at 11 a.m., as I'm scrolling through, I see Peter Pan's flight is available for 5:15 p.m. That fits with my stacking strategy. It's after 4:30, it's something me and my family want to ride, so I go ahead and book that right at 11 a.m. Once again, my 2-hour timer starts. So 11 a.m., maybe I'm at the park, maybe I'm getting some lunch, my 2-hour timer goes, and at 1 p.m. it goes off, reminds me that now I can make another reservation. So again, I haven't used any, I have my stack of 2 right now, and I'm going to scroll through Genie Plus again and try to find another attraction reservation for later in the afternoon or evening. At 1 p.m. I'm looking through and I see Space Mountain is now available for 7 p.m. Cool, that gives me a little break after Peter Pan's flight. Maybe I can eat some dinner then. So I book Space Mountain for 7 p.m. Now I hold a stack of 3. that's going to start at 4:30 and as of now goes through 7, and I can ride Jungle Cruise, Peter Pan's Flight, and Space Mountain. I'm already pretty happy with what my afternoon is shaping up to look like. So at 1 p.m., my 120 minutes starts again, and at 3 p.m., I'm eligible to make my 4th reservation. So I'm scrolling through Genie Plus, seeing what's available, and at 3 p.m., I see Big Thunder Mountain Railroad available at 8 p.m. So I'm going to return at 8 p.m. to ride Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. You can start to see where stacking gets a little problematic here. So far, nothing's overlapping, but I am setting myself up for quite a bit of walking in the evening. So if you're going through, you might want to prioritize walking a little less instead of going from Space Mountain at 7 to Big Thunder Mountain Railroad at 8, but that's up to you. So now I have a stack of 4: Jungle Cruise, Peter Pan's Flight, Space Mountain, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. I set my timer again for another 2 hours, and now it's not going to go off till 5 o'clock. So at this point, I'm going to get to start using my stack if I want to, or I can wait until after 5 o'clock when I book another one to check into my first reservation at Jungle Cruise. But at 5 p.m., I'm eligible to make another reservation. So I scroll through. At 5 p.m., Haunted Mansion is available, and so I book that. Its return time is about 9 o'clock now. So I now hold a stack of 5 if I've not yet checked into Jungle Cruise. Jungle Cruise, Peter Pan's Flight, Space Mountain, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, and Haunted Mansion. That's a lot of reservations that I can be using throughout my evening. At 5 p.m., my timer resets. So it'll go until 120 minutes have passed, or I've checked into Haunted Mansion, because that's the last reservation I made. So my 120 minutes passes well before my 9 o'clock return time rolls around. So at 7 p.m., I can make another reservation. And as I'm scrolling through, at 7 p.m., I see Pirates of the Caribbean is available at 8:45 p.m. That makes sense with my plans, so I book that one at 7 p.m. At that point, because it's an 8:45 p.m. return time that I've booked at 7 p.m., chances are I'm going to be checking into it before my 2 hours are up. So my stacking strategy I've now sort of hit the limit on, and I'll probably convert from waiting 120 minutes to booking whatever's available after I check into Pirates of the Caribbean, because I've stacked enough and started using enough that now I can just book whatever's available and try to fill in the rest of my late night with whatever I can ride to get the most use out of Genie Plus as possible. So let's look at what our stacking strategy allowed us to do at the Magic Kingdom on March 13th. Our evening looks a little like this. We can check into Jungle Cruise as early as 4:30, but let's say that we waited until we made that 5 p.m. reservation. So we check into Jungle Cruise at 5 o'clock. We ride Jungle Cruise, we head on up to Peter Pan's Flight because our return time window opened for that at 5:15. We make it there, let's say, a little after 5:30. We ride Peter Pan's Flight. We have a nice relaxing dinner somewhere. Then we can check into our Space Mountain reservation at 7 p.m. We have a little bit of a break here, so I could opportunistically do a few Tomorrowland attractions that tend to not have lengthy standby queues, maybe a relaxing ride on the People Mover. Then I head across the park to Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, which I can check into at 8 p.m. I ride that. Maybe I wait for Splash, maybe I catch Country Bear Jamboree or the Tiki Room. Then I check into Pirates of the Caribbean at 8:45. Then I can check into Haunted Mansion almost as soon as I get done with Pirates of the Caribbean. And then I can use all of my book now, ride now reservations for the rest of the evening because Magic Kingdom's open to 11 p.m. And there's a lot of attractions down at the bottom of that availability chart that let me to book into really late in the evening. So I can book them, I can ride them almost immediately, and I can do that opportunistically based on where I am in the park to minimize that wait. So this is a pretty awesome evening at the Magic Kingdom. I'm riding a lot of headliners, and I'm barely having to wait at all. That's just one example of stacking. You could apply the same strategy at any park on any day. It's going to be easier to stack on higher crowd level days because things are booking up much further in advance than it would be on lower crowd days when things are booking closer, and so you would have to wait until things are available in the afternoon or evening. What are some things that a stacking strategy can help you do during your Disney vacation? One good way to use stacking is if you're park hopping. So if you watch Genie 201, You know, Genie Plus is much more useful at Magic Kingdom and Hollywood Studios than it is at Animal Kingdom or Epcot. If you've got park hoppers anyway, it's really good to start your day at either Animal Kingdom or Epcot. I like Animal Kingdom the best because it opens the earliest. You do the standby queues in that park that don't generate as much waits. And then, as you're waiting in those standby lines, you're stacking your reservations for your second park of the day, which is either Hollywood Studios or Magic Kingdom. So even in the example of our March 13th Magic Kingdom stacking, we could have started our day in Animal Kingdom and been waiting in the standby queues for the safaris or Flight of Passage or whatever else we wanted to do as we were grabbing all of those Genie Plus reservations to use at Magic Kingdom later in the evening. Another complaint I've heard a lot about Genie Plus is that it takes away the option to have a relaxing afternoon or midday break at your resort. So a lot of families with young kids love to do this. You rope drop, you take advantage of the lack of lines, then you go back to the resort for nap time, pool time, and then you finish out the day with fireworks and lower lines at the park again. And so people think that if you're having to check your phone every 2 hours, or you're dependent on those times that you booked and one happens to fall at 2 p.m., that suddenly your plan is ruined. That doesn't have to be the case. Yes, if you want to take full advantage of that 120-minute rule and make reservations as often as you can, you probably have to be checking your phone or setting a timer for yourself, but you can still stack for really late in the afternoon or evening and leave that time for yourself to go back to your resort maybe earlier in the afternoon to avoid those peak crowds. It's possible. It might not be as relaxing as it once was if you're constantly checking that phone to try to get new reservations. That wraps up the basics of what you'll need to know to get started with stacking for Genie Plus. Next week, on March 18th, we've got episode 302, Special Cases for Genie Plus and Other Questions You Might Have. Some of the things we plan on going over are things like child swap, how that works with Genie Plus, speed strategies that you might need to know to help you grab those popular ones quicker, and park hopping combos that we suggest based on the data. But this is also the opportunity for you to get your questions answered. So make sure you type those in the comments or email me at beckyg@touringplans.com so we can answer your questions on our March 18th episode. The week after that, March 25th, we're taking a break, spring break. And not just because it's thematic with our teaching episodes, but also because my family's going to be on spring break in real life. After that spring break, we're going to pivot to the West Coast. A lot of people have been asking for Disneyland data. We need to wait a little bit for these, not only because I want to cover all of Disney World in one chunk, but also because we don't have a lot of Disneyland data yet. So if you're a Touring Plans user and you're a Disneyland regular, take this opportunity to time some waits for us in your Lines app so we can gather the data we need to give you the information you want about how to use Genie Plus there. Assuming we get enough data, on April 1st, we'll have our Genie 102, which is Disneyland differences. Ways that Genie is different in Disneyland than it is in Disney World, because there are a few different rules and behaviors there. And then the week after that, on April 8th, we'll have Genie 202, how to save time at Disneyland. So similar to our 201 episode, sort of the rides that you're going to want to prioritize based on what sells out first and what can save you the most time. Thanks for joining us this week on Touring Plans Teaches. We'll talk to you later.